Welcome back, everyone. Last time we were looking at elif statements and then the debugger. I strongly recommend you go back and look at debugger if you don't know how to use it. It's going to be so useful, and I'm going to be using it in this video. And it's going to be just vital to making things easy to understand. So anyway, we're doing while loops. I'm going to get started. I'm going to call this while loops.py, of course. So now in while loops.py, I'm going to have a counter. I'm going to set it equal to 0. While counter is less than 7, print the counter. Then counter plus equals 1. You might recall from Unit 1, this is an assignment operator. So what that will do is it will actually add 1 to the counter itself. And then at the end here, I'm just going to print end of loop. Perfect. So now I have the counter starting at 1. I'm going to while the counter is less than 7. So while is very similar to an if statement that will repeat itself. All the indented code will repeat itself as long as this condition is true. Like an if statement, it does this if this condition is true, and it'll just keep running this indented code until this is no longer true. So it's going to print the value of the counter, add 1 to the counter, and then it's going to check to see if it's less than 7, and then it'll print it again and keep adding and going through it and looping until it gets to the end. So what's nice about this is if I use the debugger now, I'm going to add a breakpoint. I'm going to debug, and it's going to pause. So it's paused, nothing's printed. If I hit, I'm going to do step into for the first loop through. My counter is 0, so it should print 0. Then after I complete this line, my counter should go up by 1 because it's plus equals 1. So now my counter is 1. We can see over here it was 0. I can't go backwards in a debugger. It only lets you go forward. Step out doesn't behave that way. Basically, the only ones you need to really worry about is step into, continue. This is to restart, and that's to stop. So those are the 4 main buttons you're going to use. Anyway. Now I'm going to press continue, and it should print 1, and then the new value of the counter should be 2 by the time it reaches the top. So 2. Is 2 less than 7? Yes, it is. So I can press continue again, continue again, continue again, and just let it keep going until it ends the loop. Because as soon as counter hits 7, it's done. 7 is not less than 7, so it's just going to end right there. Okay. What if we want to count down, though? So we want to start the counter at the top. Let's say we start at 7. And while the counter is greater than 0, because we want to count down, not up, I'm going to print the counter, subtract 1 from it, and it's going to keep going until it hits 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save using Control S, and then I'm going to debug. So now I'm going to step into. My counter is 7. It should print 7 first. It printed 7. Perfect. Now it's going to subtract 1 from it. Yes, counter value is now 6. Is 6 greater than 0? It is. I'm just going to press continue to go through this. Go all the way through. There we go. It gets down to 1 because after it prints 1, it's going to subtract. It's going to become 0. Once counter is 0, 0 is not greater than 0, so it ends. All right. Now there's 2 more things I need to teach you. 2 more keywords. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use an if statement. So if counter is equal to, let's say 5, because I want it to happen earlier on in the loop, then break. I'm only using an if statement because if it's not true, I don't really care. I don't want to change anything, so I don't need else. So if the counter is equal to 5, break. And what break does is it ends the loop for us. So I'm just going to put a breakpoint inside the if statement so that it'll run until it is time to break. And it'll stop right before it breaks the loop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to debug the file again. So counter went through when it was 7, 6, and now it's subtracted from 6, right? So now it's 5. It hasn't printed it because it has to check, print, then it subtracts. But because it subtracts here, then it uses the if statement afterwards. It is now 5 and hasn't printed. 5 is equal to 5. It's going to break. And what break does is it just ends the loop. So break is a key word that if a condition is met using an if statement, you can end the loop prematurely. There's another term you can use called continue. So continue works very similarly, except let's run it and I'll show you. Now I'm at continue. I'm going to step into continue. Just goes to the top. Now, because of the way this is coded, it is still going to behave as if it doesn't even exist because continue is at the end of the code. So what I need to do to actually skip 5 here is I either need to put this inside before the continue, because if I hit continue before I subtract, so I need to subtract once again, or I need to move print after the continue and outside of the if statement like this. So I could do this as another option, but because order matters, this is going to change our starting number because our starting number was 7, right? But because I subtract and then print, our starting number is now going to be 6. So we have to be mindful of these things. So let me just run through this. Oops, restart. I didn't hit the restart. Okay, it starts at 6 because it subtracts then prints. 6 is greater than 0, and then it'll subtract, and then we'll hit our if statement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an if statement on the if, and I'm going to debug just so we can see it happen in real time. All right, so now the counter is 5. It was 6. Now it's 5, and I hit continue when it was 6. It's going to go into the if statement, and it's going to hit continue. It's going to jump back up to the start of the loop and skip that print. So now it jumps back up, and now it's subtracting, checking, and because 4 is not equal to 5, it's going to print the counter, and it's just going to keep doing this. And it's going to print all the numbers except for 5, and I'm just going to get rid of that breakpoint and run the rest. There we go. So 6, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. It also changed our last number. Our last number is 0 now instead of 1. So we have to be mindful of the order that we do things in our loop, the edge cases, because it will affect what we start and end with. So you always have to be thinking about how things will start and end with while loops. Okay? You can also have an infinite while loop by doing while true counter plus equals 1 print counter. Now, what will happen is I'm going to print a ton of numbers very, very quickly until the computer will either crash or I stop it, which I don't want it to crash, so I'm just going to stop it. So you have to be mindful of how you're doing things. Endless loops are not always the best way to do things. You always want to make sure you have an exit case. So either here or an if statement with a break to actually exit the program if you need to. All right, that should be enough for you to work through your while loops. And I will see you in the next one.